Hello, folks. Welcome back to Merrill Math. I'm Mr. Merrill, and today we're going to be talking about percent of change. So this is a topic that tends to challenge a lot of students because we have a lot of misconceptions when it comes to percents. Not really misconceptions, but I would say we have a lot of difficulty just thinking about numbers in this way. So there is a connection between decimals and fractions and percents. And if that connection, when we learn about those types of numbers and operations, if that connection isn't strong for you, this topic is kind of challenging. And it's something that I see students struggle with quite a bit. But it's a very simple topic as long as you remember that percent of change is basically just the amount of change divided by the original amount. And when you do that operation, you're going to get some decimal number. Now, when you have a decimal and you need to change it to a percent, all that is moving the decimal point two spaces to the right. So if I have, for instance, 0.25, we could say, okay, that is equal to 25%. The difficulty comes, so if you see a decimal here, you just move it two places to the right. That's easy enough to do. But if this decimal number that you get doesn't have a decimal point in it, say you get 3, where's the decimal point? Well, it's understood that is 3.0, and then you move it from there. And that can be a point of conflict for a lot of students. Okay, so understand that change can be either an increase or a decrease. Change can't be nothing. It can't be equal to 0 because that's not a change. So you're either going to go up or down. So your number is either going to increase or decrease. So we'll look at some examples here. We have a price change from $10 to $4. And it says, what is the percent of change? So if we look at this, we have the amount of change, which in this case is $6. So from 10 to 4, the amount that it changed was $6. The original amount, the amount where you started, was $10. So 6 divided by 10. If we do our calculator operation here, say 6 over 10, that is 0.6. So the calculator can give us that number. Changing that to a percent tells us it's a 60% change. Now, in this case, the price went from a higher number to a lower number, so it's a decrease of 60%. Okay, that much is easy enough. Let's look at some more examples here. So let's go the other way. What happens if the price changes from $4 to $10? What is the percent of change? This might be surprising, but it's different. This problem is different than the other one. We know it's an increase, but it doesn't increase by the same amount that it just decreased by, because we're looking at this from a different perspective. So if we have our amount of change, which was $6, again, it's the same amount, but the original number is now 4, because that's where we're starting. That's our starting point. So if we look at that, again, you can just type this into your calculator, 6 divided by 4, and that gives you an amount of change of 1.5, or a decimal number, right, of 1.5. And we change this to a percent. So we move the decimal point 2 spaces to the right, and that gives us a 150% change, and because we're increasing from 4 to 10, that's an increased percentage. Okay, more examples. Let's say we had, let's look at some bigger numbers here. A price change from $600 to $10. Now, a lot of these problems that you're going to see with percents of change are going to deal with like discounts and sales tax, that type of thing. So that's kind of why we're looking at prices, because that just tends to be how we encounter these numbers. But it doesn't have to be. It could be how much weight changed, or a percentage of students in a school, or things like that. Crime rates, stuff like that. I mean, the numbers could be anything, but we typically see them in prices. So we have a price change from $600 to $10. This is a percent of decrease. So we have to find the amount of change and divide it by the original amount. Well, the amount of change is just 600 minus 10, right? So that's 590. Oh, my pen's dying here. Divided by the original amount. We started out at $600, so we're going to say 600. And that's going to equal some decimal number. So we're going to say 590. We're going to divide it by the original amount, and that gives us a decimal. So it's a repeating decimal, but that's okay. So 0.98 and then a bunch of threes. So 0.98 and then a bunch of threes. So we're going to move the decimal point over 2 spaces, and this ends up being a 98.3% decrease. So notice that this number is really close to 100 because the price almost went down to 0, right? So if it went from $600 to $0, that would mean that the amount of change divided by the original amount would just be equal to 1, and it's a 100% decrease. So that's the whole thing, right? So 100% of a thing is the whole thing. So that is that. One more example. So we can look at these problems in a slightly different way. What if we're given a percent of change, and then we have to find the final number, right? So what is the new price? So taking some of the numbers from the previous example in a new perspective. So what if we had a price decrease of 600% from $600? So what is the new price? So what this is telling us, if we look at the original way that we were solving the problems, right? We had the amount of change over the original amount is equal to some decimal number, right? So in this case, our decimal number is going to be, I'm going to come over here, because we have this 600% is what we changed our decimal number into. So we're going to move this decimal point back to the left to give us our decimal, and this is just 6.0. We could add the other 0 in there if we wanted to, but if we move this over 2 spaces, we see how we get to that 600%. So the amount of change over the original amount is 6.0, or just 6. So what does that tell us? Well, let's fill in some missing information here. The original amount is $600. That's where we're starting. So this amount of change, we'll call it A, over the original amount was 600, and that's equal to 6. So how do we get this? Well, A, notice that this is just an equation. We can solve that. In order to get A by itself, we're going to multiply both sides by 600. And that eliminates that from the denominator. So we have A is 6 times 6 is 36. zeros come along for the ride. So we have $3,600. So that tells us that the amount of change was $3,600. So if the price decreased by $3,600, that means that the new price is going to be the original minus this. So we're going to say 600 minus 3,600, which takes us into the negatives, right? So negative, what is that? $3,000. So what does that mean in the context of the problem? Well, what that means is if you were paying for something and they said, oh, it's 600% off today, you would get the item for $600, and then they would give you $3,600 in addition to giving you the item. So you get the item and $3,000 in change. Okay, so that is percent of change. If this video helped you out at all, give it a like. If you want to see more, because I plan on posting more, I'm back. It's been a while. A lot of things have happened, but the math is still here, so we still got to learn it. So, at any rate, thanks for watching.